Oh, that was in 1965 in Madras. And there were no photos of him around then. And when he came into the room where I was waiting, and he put his head through the door, and I didn't know it was the famous Sai Baba. He looked through, and he gave that beautiful, wide, white smile of his, and he said, "Are you the man from Australia?" Like that. I said, "Yes." I didn't even know to call him Baba or Swami, or I didn't know what he was. I thought he could be the sort of leading tumbler or jester of a circus to come or something, but I didn't know he was Sai Baba. But I did soon afterwards, because he came into the room and I saw him perform the first materialization miracle I've ever seen. He waved his hand, as you've seen so many times, and produced some vibhuti. The two Indians in the room, and he gave it to both of them, and one began to cry. Well, I hadn't seen these bhakti tears before, and I wondered why he was crying. And I was told afterwards that Swami had cured his son of some terrible disease, and I understood then why he was crying. The Swami was patting him like if he was a child. And then he came over to me. I was standing watching in this fairly small room. He came over to me and he asked me if I'd like some vibhuti. Well, you know, I'd never heard the word vibhuti before. And I said yes, because I guessed it was the ash he was producing. So he put his hand right up close to my face to do it. Because already he knew I was a skeptic and was watching out for any trickery or conjuring. And he produced this vibhuti and he put it into my hand. And I didn't know what to do with it, Steen. So somebody said, "Eat it, it's good for your health." And I started eating this ash. I'd never eaten ash before. But it tasted quite acceptable, you know. Nice taste, really. And so he said, when I was told it was good for my health, I remember that Iris wasn't too, in fact, Iris was back at Theosophical headquarters in, you know, at Adia. And she hadn't been well enough to come. So I thought I was going to take some home to my wife, Swami. She's not well. I didn't call him Swami at all. I didn't know. I guess by then he was Sai Baba, you see. And I don't know how I addressed him. And he said, "Bring her tomorrow at 5 o'clock.
Bring who?
My wife. And I said, "Can I take some home to my wife? She's not well." She had hepatitis, actually. She was very sick. And so he said, "Bring it tomorrow at 5. That was the beginning. I was planning to write a book after we had finished our studies at the headquarters of the Theosophical Society. There's a 6-month course of study in the Sanatana Dharma, in the ancient wisdom of India, really. And we were planning then to travel around India, contact different teachers and ashrams, and we had addresses given to us, and I thought I would write a book about the different ones. It was that man who wrote the famous book. It doesn't matter, but anyway, he wrote a book called In Search of Secret India. Do you know his name, Steve?
I don't remember his name.
Anyway, that had been written about 30 years before, you see, during the days of British India. And this now was 65, well into the time of independent India. And I thought it'd be interesting to see what teachers there are around, you know, different ashrams. But I guess there was a good supply, as there always is in India, and indeed there was, we found later. So I was planning to do that. And then when I went to Puttapati for the first time, and if I describe Puttapati as it was then, I'd take the whole of this program. So I won't. But I was sitting on my bedroll just outside the door of dear old Kasturi, you know. He was a kind of a welcoming official for the ashram. And he had no official name. He was just writing about Swami, you see. But when people came, he usually met them at his Kasturi. So I was sitting there thinking, and it was evening, and Kasturi said, I can't give you a room until I see Baba. He used to call him Baba. He said, I don't know which room to give you. He wants to give you. So he said, you'd have to wait a while. So I'm just sitting comfortably on my bedroll. The sun was about to go down, a beautiful sunset. Just other side of me, in the Mandir, which was much smaller then than it is now, was a sound of bhajans, beautiful sound of the sacred songs, we call them bhajans. And so it had a great effect on me, and while I'm sitting there listening and looking out at the red sunset, I thought came into my mind, I'm sure I think it would have been from Swami anyway. I thought, I can't just give a chapter of my book to Sai Baba. I'll have to write a whole book about him. And I was sure then that I had to do that. And Swami was still in the prayer hall leading the bhajans. Kasturi was wandering around. When Kasturi came back, I told him of my great decision to write a book. Of course, he'd already written the first part of the life of Sai Baba in English. And he said, oh, well, that'd be nice if it happens, you know, in a very kind of skeptical voice. I guess other people had said the same thing. But anyway, he didn't believe me at all. He thought I was dreaming and just hoping and wishing I could do it or something. And I'd never met him before, actually. So I left then, and he showed me to the room Swami said I should have. And that was in the only little guest house that then existed, just behind the Mandir on the ladies' side, you see. And it was a nice little place, you know, he took me into. There was a broad veranda with that strong wire netting, stronger than netting. What do you call it? Sort of storm wire or something. Not the kind of thing you could break through with a wire cutter or anything like that. And very broad veranda, and on this broad veranda there were 3 units for people. I was given the first one. And I went in and I found there was a good, beautiful, soft bed with sheets and blankets. I was used to ashram life that was pretty rough. I'd been around the north of India by then. And it was very comfortable. Then you went through a door into another room, which you could call a dressing room, but which in fact was there for Indians, and they bring their servants who cook in that room. I found this later because I shared it with an Indian. And he had his servant in there with a kerosene stove preparing meals, you see. And opening off that room was a shower room and toilet. But the toilet was pull chain toilet, but it didn't work. It was the only one in the ashram and it didn't work. So right near it was a big container of water, wide or a yard wide, or a metre wide, let's say, and about this high, about 4 feet high, full of water, with a dipper there. So you used that for the toilet and also for the morning dip bath, dipper bath.
What year was that?
Huh?
What year was that?
That was 1966.
And how many visits have you made to Swami?
How
many visits have you made to Sai Baba?
In all the years?
Yes.
I've lost count of them, Steen. I wouldn't even be able to hazard a guess.
Yeah, what do you think?
Huh?
10, 20, 50?
Oh, 50 or 100, probably.
That many, yeah.
Oh, well, we lived with him for a long time. I saw him every day. But I want to answer your question about how I started the book.
Yes.
I was coming to that, you see. So anyway, I settled down in this room.
Which book was that?
Man of Miracles, the one that's moved the world, apparently. Excuse me taking my glass off. But anyway, I stayed the night, and in the morning, Al Kasturi came up to my room. And he had books under his arm, 4 or 5, I suppose. And he said, I told Swami what you said about writing a book on him. And he said, told me to bring you, Murphet, any books that are written and were in English for you to read. So here they are. And I said, now what do I owe you for that? He said, nothing. Swami said to give them to you. So I had a few books to read. One of them, Kasturi's, and different translations of Swami's discourses, that sort of thing. And I understood by this remark by Kasturi that when he told Swami I was doing that, Swami didn't take the attitude, oh, that'll be nice if it happens, as Kasturi had. I saw he knew I was going to do it. In fact, he knew that's what I'd come for. He knew I was to be one of his scribes, a scribe that had much experience in the writing field, which you need to interest outsiders. That's how it came about, and Swami kept me up to writing of it by telling people in my presence that I was doing it. And I had other writings to do at the time. I had Writers' Fellowship to write 2 biographies of the founders of the Theosophical Society. And they were urgent because I had this fellowship for it from America, from a Kern Foundation. And Quest books had just started. And my 2 were the first published in the Quest books. Anyway, so when Swami would tell people that I was writing about him, they'd say to me, oh, how are you getting on? Nearly finished? And I had to say, no, I haven't really started yet. I was still gathering material and checking it.
Do you mean to say that Swami was pushing you all the time?
He was reminding me that I had to do that job, you see. On reflection, I now know that that was my function, my main function. I had to write others too, but this one book had to be the one that did the work. And I'm sure Swami knew that from the beginning. He knew it in the way he knows things, you see. And I hadn't the slightest idea that the book would have such an effect. Well, I'd never read it since I wrote it, which was about 1969. 69 was published in 1970 in London. And I had not read it since. I might have read a few bits, extracts, paragraphs, but not right through. And so all those years had passed, and I think it was last year, 1996, these tapes came up, and young Robert Menzies, as Australians will know, is the grandson of old Robert Menzies, a very famous Prime Minister of England. And he is an actor, young Robert, and my son knows him in Melbourne. And somebody asked him to put this book on tape. Some libraries in Melbourne that produce spoken books and braille for the blind, you know. And I had no idea they were going to do it. Although I had given permission to be produced in braille, but I didn't know he was going to put it on a cassette. And I was really pleased when I got it, you know. And I listened to it, and he's such a good reader. Such a sympathetic voice he has. Not a great orator like his grandfather, but a kind of very sympathetic human voice. And he read this book beautifully. I wish I could play it to you so you'd hear it. And then, as you say, it kind of like as if somebody else wrote it, you know. And I saw it objectively. And I saw then why it has the effect on the world.
You told me that you even cried a little. You told me that you even cried a little when you heard it.
Oh, I did. I had tears at times for things that happened, you know, in that book. I was very pleased with the way he read it, I must say.
How did you get the inspiration? Of course you got the inspiration to write from Swami, but did you feel his guidance in writing?
I did feel his guidance. Yes, indeed I did.
In what way?
I don't know. It's just that he was there within me, you know. I'm not saying I was a channeler. I'm not a channeler. I'm not channeling anything. And I'm not like who's the man in England who claims that what he writes comes directly from Swami, and he's the channel. Lucas Raleigh. Mm-hmm. Lucas Raleigh, he says that. But not me. I don't say I was a channel. But Swami is in our hearts anyway, I've learned since then, those far-off days. And we and he are one. And somehow or another he was able to inspire me. And that's why the book has done the work it was meant to do. It's brought the great crowds, helped to bring the great crowds, and now it makes it uncomfortable for me and for you. You know what I mean?
Yes.